Well, gun sales have reached record numbers in the U.S. The FBI's National Instant Background Check System processed nearly 2 million gun-related checks in October. It is the 6th month in a row to see a record number of checks. If someone wants a gun and they're worried about those mandatory background checks and what might turn up, there is one big loophole in the Georgia law.
Yeah, it is. This is the subject CBS46 investigative reporter Art Harris knows all about, and he took a hidden camera to a gun show to demonstrate how fast and easy it is to buy guns legally. Art.
As someone who's actually been shot at, it's accurate to say I have a healthy respect for guns, but I also grew up around guns, even got a few from Santa and still own some legally. How easy is it to buy one in Georgia? It wasn't hard for me when I went undercover to find out. We took our undercover camera to a gun show in North Georgia the other day and went inside. There were tables of handguns, even custom-built assault rifles for sale, and boxes of ammunition. Dealers even tried to sell my wife a gun that fit in her purse, in designer colors, of course.
So that way, if you did want to have it in your purse, then you know your safety's on. You know, just push that down.
Well, she just had a manicure. Is that going to mess it up?
No. No.
Do women ask you about that?
It won't mess your manicure up as bad as it'll mess up the person you're aiming it at.
Dealer said I could buy a gun in 15 minutes. That's if I filled out and passed an FBI background check, which they do by phone on the spot. You'll be rejected for a variety of reasons. If you've been convicted of a felony, if you're a fugitive, if you're an illegal user of marijuana, if you've been convicted of domestic violence, if you're an illegal alien. FBI staff on duty 17 hours a day are supposed to reject those categories and the mentally unstable, if those records are on file. You could lie, of course, but that would make you subject to perjury charges, a felony. But that might not matter in the slightest to someone not in his or her right mind, someone planning a violent homicide, for instance. It's actually something of a misconception that gun shows are supermarkets for criminals. Dealers are licensed and must conduct the same federally mandated background checks as gun shop owners, like Ron Moon, who owns CJI Guns in Tucker.
My guns have never shot anybody. It's the people buying them.
Sometimes he rejects a buyer based on his own gut feeling, whether the background check rules them out or not.
People that I have had to deny look just like me and you. I had one older gentleman in his 80s, he got denied, and he said, well, maybe it was that getaway car I drove during that bank robbery back in 1958. And I said, yeah, that'll do it.
There is one gun show loophole. If I knew I'd flunked the background check, I might find a private seller willing to meet me out back, hush hush, and hand him cash for a gun. That's a legal transaction. Private sellers aren't required to do background checks. I can sell you a gun. You can sell me a gun. Not one piece of paper involved except money. But a straw purchase is illegal. That means you can't give someone else to buy a gun for you. In America, private citizens can even give each other guns as presents. Like this rare rocket gun I inherited from my father. The gun show crowd loved it. Just to dispel one more myth, FBI studies show guns bought at gun shows almost never get used in violent crimes, unless they're later stolen. So again, gun shows themselves aren't a big problem in my estimation. The real loophole is you and me. Two individuals can buy and sell a gun without ever saying a word about it. And that does happen all the time. I'm Art Harris for CBS 46 Investigates.
Art, thank you. The gunfight coverage continues at 5 o'clock. I look at whether the city of Atlanta is breaking state law by stockpiling guns that are required to be sold to licensed dealers. It's a reality check you'll see only on CBS 46.
Then at 6, our Julian Johnson tackles extreme road rage. First, it was just angry drivers running people off the road, but now we are seeing more cases where people are pulling out guns. And we also look at the most violent generation, the most dangerous age group in the country when it comes to committing gun violence. Mike Dunstan has that report tonight at 11.
And if you've missed any of our reports, and there are a lot of them, you can check them out at CBS46.com and our mobile app. You can also give us your take on the gun debate through our social media channels.
Overall, gun-related deaths are down.
That's right. All this week, CBS 46 taking a close look at guns and gun violence in a series of special reports. Kim Passoff takes a closer look at some of the numbers on gun homicides.
Once again, we want to utilize our CBS46 smart screen to take you inside of the numbers. And today we want to focus on some positive news. So let's begin with this. When it comes to the gun homicide rate in America, it is actually down pretty significantly by about 50%. According to the CDC, from 1993 to 2000, the homicide rate fell by 1/2. Let's take a look at the actual statistics there. According to the CDC, for every 100,000 people back in 1993, 7.8 of them were killed by gun violence. Compare that to 3.8 at the end of the 2000s. So really it went from about 8 people to about 4 people. So a very significant drop off there. And we'll continue the good news with overall gun deaths being down. They are down by about 30% since 1993. That includes things like suicides, accidental shootings, and homicides. Again, down 30% since 1993, according to the CDC. But here's one area that is an exception: deadly officer-involved shootings. Those actually seem to be trending upwards, according to the CDC. Back in 2009, there were just 333 of them. Compare that to 467 in 2013. And when it comes to people's perceptions about gun violence in America, we find that people really don't seem to know these statistics. According to a recent Pew survey, 56% of people actually believe that gun violence is on the increase in America, while 25% of people believe that it is the same, and only 12% of people got it right and know that it is actually on the decline. Now, we have these numbers and so much more for you on our website. If you want to go inside the numbers for yourself, go to CBS46.com.
We invite you to join the conversation on the gun fight. If you've missed any of our reports, you can check them out at CBS46.com and our mobile app. You can also give us your take on the gun debate through our social media channels.
Well, during our mini reports on the gunfight, we've uncovered a fascinating situation right here in the city of Atlanta. Tens of thousands of guns confiscated by law enforcement. They're not being destroyed. They're also not being sold back to the public. There are a lot of layers to this story, but one basic conclusion: the city of Atlanta looks like they're breaking state law. This is a reality check you won't see anywhere else. It was just a day ago when our Sharon Reed took you into a warehouse where the city of Atlanta holds thousands of weapons. Here's a look.
We're inside the Atlanta Police Department's crime lab. Here, more than 10,000 weapons, all seized from crime scenes over the years. Under new Georgia law, they're supposed to be made available to the public again. Supposed to be.
Now, where Sharon was standing right there, maybe 400 to 500 guns, but what she couldn't show you, a separate room where the city of Atlanta is housing another 10,000 guns. Now, here's the point Marikasim Reed and Chief Turner made, that state law prevents them from destroying those confiscated guns.
We are now in the process of storing all the weapons that have cleared our judiciary process. And we believe that it's really catastrophic for us to do just that.
Now, see, before 2012, police in cities across Georgia, they could destroy the guns they confiscated or they could use them for training. But in 2012, legislators changed the law, forcing police to sell the guns with the money going back to the county. There was almost 3.5 years that went by since then, and since then the city of Atlanta has confiscated, as we told you, over 10,000 guns.
Candidly, it's very difficult for me to lead on this, because even in the state of Georgia, when we take illegal guns off the street, under Georgia state law right now, we actually have to return them or make them available to the public in some form.
But the problem here, the city of Atlanta isn't doing that. In fact, Sharon Reed asked Chief Turner if even once the city of Atlanta has sold weapons back to licensed dealers. And the answer?
We cannot destroy weapons. We have an obligation, according to the new law, that we have to maintain those weapons after they've been adjudicated. For instance, if we've captured or gotten a weapon for evidential purposes, after the adjudication of that crime is concluded, we have an obligation to resell that, rebid that out, get that to gun purchasers so that they can resell those. The city of Atlanta has not done that.
But reality check here, Senate Bill 350, which became Georgia law in 2012, mandates that municipal, county, and state police authorities return all seized firearms not currently being held as evidence in a criminal investigation to the lawful owner if able. It reads, quote, if the lawful owner is not found or unable to take possession of the firearm, the law requires that municipalities shall not have the right to reject any and all bids or to cancel any proposed sale of such firearms. And all sales shall be to persons who are licensed as firearm collectors, dealers, importers, or manufacturers. The law requires that the city resell those guns, not destroy them, and not just sit on them.
So you haven't defied the Georgia legislature, but you're in a holding pattern as a law enforcement, chief law enforcement officer.
That is correct.
So to be clear, it is correct that in 3.5 years, the city has not sold those confiscated guns to licensed gun dealers. So actually, the city has not defied the Georgia legislature. The city is just breaking the law. More from Senate Bill 350 here. In addition, the law requires in no event shall such auctions occur less frequently than once every 6 months during any time in which the political subdivision or state custodial agency has an inventory of sellable firearms. So if what Chief Turner told Sharon Reed is true, then the mayor and the police chief are clearly breaking Georgia state law. And that's what you need to know. Look, I understand this is a complicated subject, but then again, it's not. If you don't like state law, then you work to change it. If you don't want to sell firearms back into your own community, then find licensed dealers who are out of state to take these weapons. But to say that you morally object to the law and therefore you don't have to follow it, well, Chief Turner and Mayor Reed would never allow that same reasoning for the rest of us accused of breaking the law. That's Reality Check. Let's talk about that tonight on Twitter. And Sharon, certainly a lot of opinions on this one. You saw those guns firsthand. No doubt. I mean, there is an issue here with fear of putting those back on the streets, but the law is the law.
And I mean, you're focusing in on the letter of the law. I get that. And the truth be told, you and I had some candid conversations offline today. But the mayor's point, and he was very candid, Mayor Kasim Reed and Chief Turner, they believe it would be catastrophic to dump these guns on the streets of Atlanta, urban versus rural. They think it's catastrophic to dump these guns given some of the carnage that we've seen.
And just very quickly, again, reading through that state law, it does not specify where those licensed gun dealers would have to be. It does not say that we have to resell them to licensed gun dealers back here in the metro area. They could be out of state. Maybe more for a discussion later.
All right, it certainly is.
Opinions expressed during Just a Minute are not necessarily those of CBS 46 News or its employees. If you want to comment, you can go to CBS46.com and click on the Just a Minute tab. Comment there or on the CBS 46 Facebook page, or send us an email at justaminute@cbs46.com.
As a Christian and a conservative, no issue is more conflicting to me than the issue of guns. As a conservative, I believe the Second Amendment that gives citizens the same right to bear arms as the government is critical to protecting our democracy. But as a Christian, I recognize that we live in a fallen world. Evil people do evil things, and more often than not, they use guns. So here's where I land. The gun lobby has to be willing to support some reasonable gun restriction. Our founders could never have envisioned an assault rifle or a semi-automatic pistol. How about starting there? Or what about supporting smart guns, which can only be fired by their owner? Meantime, just last week, the last remaining gun shop in San Francisco closed its doors. Too many government regulations, the owner said. So now, if you live in San Francisco, you cannot buy a gun there to protect yourself or your family. That's not just unreasonable, that's dangerous. As for Jesus, he wouldn't have been drawn into the gun debate at all. He'd be more concerned with changing the hearts of bad people than he would be changing laws. I'm Kimberly Kennedy.
Opinions expressed during Just a Minute are not necessarily those of CBS 46 News or its employees.
All this week, we're looking at gun laws, gun violence, and the gun culture in Georgia. In a series of special reports, we're calling it The Gunfight.
Tonight, a growing problem, people getting angry on the road. Our Julian Johnson looks at extreme road rage cases where guns are not only being flashed, they're being fired.
And Sharon, I'll tell you, we wanted to dig deep into this subject of so-called extreme road rage. Are guns the problem, or do people simply need to learn self-control behind the wheel?
The only motive we know right now, unless the investigation tells us something else, is going to be road rage. They were angry.
Is it worth it to get engaged with a driver who you don't know has a gun or not? Do you want to eat tonight? Do you want to go home tonight? That becomes the question.
Those are the kinds of moments many of us face every day, navigating what seems like a never-ending cluster of cars Atlanta is famous for. Sooner or later, you're cut off or flipped off.
As we're driving around the car, we got all sorts of little incidences that are happening. Almost everybody sees something every day, that they don't like.
We're riding with anger management specialist Richard Taylor. He tells us people voluntarily come into his office every day to deal with their own road rage issues. And he's also seen recent reports on CBS46 documenting the ever-rising episodes of angry people on the road, specifically angry people with guns.
They snap, and so they're losing their conscious ability to be reasonable, and they just focus on the one person. That's the big debate we have in the nation over access to guns.
Taylor explains stress and anger play major roles in rage situations. Add a gun or another weapon to the mix, and it's an extreme case, one that typically comes along with criminal charges. Take this incident back in early October.
Drawing a firearm in just about every case should be an absolute last resort, and it seems like that was this guy's first resort.
A motorcyclist is caught pointing a gun at a car in Coweta County during an alleged road rage issue. No shots were fired here, but in other cases, there were more violent endings.
And she had a baby in her hand, and she ran up to the officer, and by that time, a gentleman got out. He didn't have a shirt on, and he was bleeding up in here.
Not even children are exempt from an angry driver's aggression. In April, a baby was shot in the foot in what police determined was a dispute on the road in DeKalb County. And most recently, a woman was shot as she drove her Corvette along Stone Mountain Parkway. DeKalb investigators say she gestured to the car behind her to go around. That's when the other person got angry and opened fire. So how do you prevent or avoid road rage? Well, it can no doubt be difficult, but professionals suggest that you not retaliate or react to any of the drivers on the road. And yes, that includes hand gestures. And getting out of your car and angrily approaching someone should never be an option. And most of all, if you know you're someone who gets easily upset while on the road, it's best to leave your gun not in the car, but at home.
Get the gun out of the car. Don't carry the gun.
And here's another note. Atlanta drivers are ranked the second most discourteous in the nation, so the odds of having an issue on the road here is even greater than elsewhere. And we also looked at state law for carrying guns in the car. And unless you're prohibited from having a gun in the first place, carrying in the car is not illegal and can be done without a permit. Also, it doesn't have to be unloaded or even in a lockbox. So in short, the smart thing to do is just zone out the distractions and drive safely. Julian Johnson, CBS 46 News.
A gunfight, the violent generation. Who are they and what's behind the shoot first behavior and what can be done to change it? CBS 46 News is next.
The gunfight and the so-called violent generation.
The first thing that people talk about is I'm through fighting. Right. I'm going to get a gun.
We take a closer look at what's behind the shoot-first mentality and ways of changing the behavior with a local man who's lived it and turned his life around.
The most dangerous age group in the country when it comes to gun homicides. It is young people ages 18 to 34.
Department of Justice stats show that for every 100,000 people in 2010, homicide rates were 10.7 for people ages 18 to 24 and 8.1 for people 25 to 34. Those rates are less than half of that for 35 to 49-year-olds and just 1.4 for people over the age of 50.
Tonight, Mike Dunstan investigates the young people behind the violence.
It's really sad that it's so easy to remember the names and faces of young people who've become the victims and suspects of recent gun violence here in Metro Atlanta. Remember this in Gwinnett County, a gas station becomes the Wild West with young men pulling out guns and unloading bullets. And remember this shooting at Bay Creek Park where police arrested this 19-year-old. This 22-year-old is accused of shooting 10 people at a club in Meriwether County over a gambling dispute. College football player Wally Clanton was shot to death at a pool party in Fayette County over the summer. And in DeKalb County, Shanika McCurdy.
She was taken out for no reason whatsoever other than just wanting to go in, get a lottery ticket, come out and mind her business.
And this gas station surveillance video shows her moments before three teens allegedly tried to steal her car, shooting and killing the 25-year-old barber.
What is in the mindset right now of our youth that they feel like guns are the first thing that they need to have as a line of defense, or just to have on them at all?
The conversation at this IBX internet radio show in Norcross: disregard for human life and gun violence in Metro Atlanta. The killing of Shanika McCurdy upset Omar Howard so much he stood outside the scene of the crime holding this sign. Today, he's a radio guest and a chaplain with Atlanta's Transitional Center. It's a minimum security prison on Ponce in Midtown Atlanta. More than 250 inmates live here.
The first thing that people talk about is I'm through fighting. Right. I'm going to get a gun.
But don't let the button-down shirt fool you.
It's just part of the street life. When I told you when I went to prison.
You heard him right. He used to be an inmate too. And he can talk the talk because he's walked the walk in prison. Locked up for 15 years in a 5-foot by 10-foot cell.
You haven't been back in 20 years.
Well, I really didn't want to revisit those memories.
Omar took me back to the Lithonia neighborhood that landed him in the big house.
Because going up that hill was the worst decision I made.
Up this hill and in this apartment complex, his and other lives changed in an instant.
You parked back here?
We parked back here, and we was trying to look for a house to break in, not knowing, that somebody was going to die that night, but, we was just trying to get money. We just wanted some money.
He says, just like today, 20 years ago, guns were easy for him to get, but here's what's changed.
A lot of these kids just are fearless compared to us. When you even talk with a lot of kids about prison, they're not even afraid of it.
So I went to Kennesaw to ask young adults about Omar's theory.
Maybe our generation is a little more desensitized, but at the same time, you have to be kind of desensitized because you see stuff like that all the time.
They see it on the video game, so of course they don't think anything of it, but when someone actually becomes a witness to gun violence or something like that, it might harm them. Might harm them mentally.
I had a friend that was murdered last fall.
And that wasn't the only friend Devontae Hughley lost to gun violence. The Kennesaw State University student had to send condolences to the families of 2 other friends. He thinks young people need to hear more about the consequences.
Tell the story when, you see the police pulling up in your yard and they're taking you out in handcuffs and you're getting in the backseat of their car.
But in the beginning, Mike, they don't care. I mean, a gun is a gun to them. A gun is for protection. A gun is what my friends have.
We met LaTanya Askew at the internet radio station, too. She's a Metro Atlanta attorney and says her young clients don't believe the seriousness of gun violence until they hear the charges or they see the financial bind their parents are put in, coming up with money for bond or to pay a lawyer. She doesn't see the violence slowing down until parents step up to the plate.
You were grown enough to make these children. Now you need to get involved in these children's lives. Checking their room, finding out what's going on in school, not blaming the teachers when students are cutting up in class.
I hated prison. I hated prison. We're heading to where I actually got locked up.
Omar Howard took us back to the intersection of Marbut Road and Panola Road in Lithonia.
That was a terrible day for me.
Where cops caught up with he and his crew in February of 1993.
That's the last day I seen of freedom for 15 years. What happened in 1993 still affects me today, and it's 2015. As far as getting jobs, down to the point of trying to find a place to live.
I just want to help young people to, make better choices.
How many of y'all love being free? How many of y'all love being free?
And these days, he's looking to the future.
Because from 15 to 18, man, I was in and out of juvenile because I didn't want to do what was right.
Speaking to these students and mentoring adults who've been in his situation, for him, it's about giving back.
I want to, make sure that I can do what I can, whatever I can, to make a difference.
And working as a chaplain here at the Atlanta Transitional Center, Omar Howard is grateful for the grace and the redemption that's been given to him. In Midtown Atlanta, Mike Dunstan, CBS 46 News.
Omar Howard started a nonprofit organization. It's called Freedom is Choice.
It's a mentoring program designed to make positive differences in the lives of troubled and at-risk young people. The Gunfight series continues tomorrow at 4. Gloria Neal talks about the littlest victims in gun violence.
And tomorrow at 5, the truth about safety locks on guns. Our Harry Samler takes a closer look to see if they prevent gun violence.
Plus, also at 5, my reality check will take a look at gun-free zones and whether they are truly ripe for mass shootings.
Investigative reporter Sally Sears looks at the politics of guns in our state. That's tomorrow at 6.
And then at 11 tomorrow night, a second reality reality check, this time looking at the issue of concealed carry licenses. Could it be that in places where there are more concealed carry weapons, there's less crime? Again, tomorrow night as we continue our coverage of the gunfight.